Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Today we are reviewing Avatar: The Way of Water. Now, people's response to this film in the build-up to its release really fascinates me. What really interests me is how people are not just indifferent about this film, I'm indifferent to a lot of films that come out, but how many people are so keen to actively voice their indifference to the Avatar films. The rejection of this sequel and this film turning into a franchise has really baffled me, because when you consider how much most of our well-known franchises have declined in this day and age, Jurassic World Dominion was rubbish, Fantastic Beasts: The Secrets of Dumbledore was atrocious, the MCU as a film franchise is definitely declined in quality. I am genuinely just so happy to have a new franchise on the rise that is a bit more consistent in quality. Because while Avatar 1 is not perfect, I do reject a lot of the criticism that it got initially. Yes, the story is simple, yes, the dialogue is very on the nose and not very complex, but I do not like the criticism of the film being like, it's a sci-fi version of Pocahontas, oh, it's just a rehash of this plotline from this film. Every film is a rehash of another film in some capacity. That is such a shallow criticism of a film to say it's derived too heavily from these other things. Every film, the sum of its parts, is heavily derived from a million other films. That is just a basic fact. Avatar 1 was fresh, it felt epic, the score was phenomenal, and it was just a basic story with a very simple concept but interesting themes that you could root for. Avatar: The Way of Water is basically the same. Simple story centered around a very tight family unit, set against a backdrop of ecological carnage and threat and a disruption of the status quo. Again, I would say that the writing of these films is not always as complex as it could be. I'm not going to comment on the visuals of this film because we all know going in it's spectacular. If nothing else, it'll be a cinematic treat to watch. I do question the longevity of this story as a franchise, definitely. I'm intrigued to see what they have mapped out for 3, 4 and 5, but they've already confirmed that Stephen Lang is going to be the overarching antagonist for the whole franchise going through. His motive with this film was purely, I want revenge on Jake Sully. I think that works as a character motivation for one self-contained film. I'm unsure if I want to kill him because he killed me is enough to sustain us for another few character arcs. They could be doing something completely different, but even in this film I felt like that is this character's only real trait at the moment. They tease some interesting character angles with Stephen Lang's Quaritch in this new kind of recombatant form, but I think they definitely could have lent into that a bit harder. I think they do a really good job of establishing the Sully family unit. I think all those characters are quite archetypal film family children vibes. You've got the dutiful brother who everyone looks up to, you've got the irresponsible middle child, the one who's slightly different and outcast, and then the young innocent one. They're very kind of stereotypical film family unit, but they're all quite endearing and I found them quite compelling together. One thing I was surprised by was how little the new characters who've been kind of heavily marketed and advertised were actually in it. The Metcaina tribe who they go and stay with and who introduce them to the Way of Water and this new underwater world really don't get a hell of a lot of screen time. Kate Winslet, who's been a big part of the press junkets, probably because she's such a big name, has barely got any scenes in this film. So for better and for worse, this film is very much centered on the Sully family and everyone else kind of orbits them and doesn't get a lot to do around them. For me, there were two weak links character-wise for this film, and they were both human characters. One is this kind of naval fishing captain whose whole occupation on Pandora is hunt the whales. He's introduced as a very clear-cut villain, and I think what they want to do is make him the water equivalent of what Quaritch was in the first one. But he just came across as a bit of a laughable caricature, and he did pull me out of certain moments of tension. And the other one is Spider. Spider is a very interesting character conceptually, but the way the film uses him is a bit more just as a character who's along for the ride. Again, I'm not sure whether it was just the acting or the writing of his scenes, but I just didn't really get the kind of emotional investment in this character with the kind of level of emotional investment that they want you to have with him. Now, it's a 3-hour film. At no point, genuinely at no point did I check my phone like wondering how long I've got left. I was really impressed at the pacing of this film. The first hour feels like there's a lot going on, a lot that gets crammed in, a lot of story that probably gets skipped over, and then we're off to the water world. And that hour is much more kind of quiet, chill, meditative, just absorbing an immersion. That is all the second hour is about. And then the final hour is just kind of an all-out set piece, action set piece. The action is phenomenal. It's definitely a smaller kind of battle than the epic sky battle we got in the first film. But the action in this film felt a lot more intimate, a lot more tense, and a lot more threatening. There were genuinely a couple of really great moments of tension that emerged in this film. The first is a kind of little forest scene in the dark in the first hour. And then there's a couple amidst that final battle where you do feel a bit on the edge of your seat. The story definitely feels generational in that a lot of the focus of this film is with the kids, specifically Loak, and Sam Worthington and Zoe Saldana kind of phase out of the film about an hour in, and they only kind of pop up here and there, which is a shame because the scenes they do share together, those parental disagreements, those discussions about family and what's best for the family, the actors really sell it. I do love them as performers, and I do think their dynamic is better here than it was in the first film. I only wish we could have got a bit more of that, because there's a moment in the kind of final action sequence where Jake Sully and Neytiri just kind of tag team their way through a load of enemies, and it is visceral. Their performances are so good. Performance-wise, I think Zoe Saldana absolutely carries the film like she did with the first one. Neytiri's just emotional expression and response is just so raw and so spot on with every single scene. I do think Sigourney Weaver struggles vocally to channel the voice of a 14-year-old. There were definitely moments when I was like, they probably should have altered that voice in some way because it does sound like a fully grown woman at times. But overall, this is just great cinema. It is just great cinema. It was never going to be a bad film. There are so many reviewers, especially in the UK, who've given this film like 1 star or 2 stars. And it's like they are just going out of their way to be bitter and hate on this film. If nothing else, it is just beautiful. It is just beautiful. And the decision to keep such a vast world and story confined to one kind of family unit works, definitely. It helps keep the film grounded. At times it does distract from what could be going on at a wider level. Like the final battle is very focused in their characters' exploits and turmoils, which obviously grounds the action and the stakes, but it's almost as if the Metkaleena tribe just sod off halfway through the battle, and I think they actually do. You just don't see them again beyond the first kind of clash. But it is absolutely one of the best film experiences of the year, 100%. You will not come out of the cinema thinking, what have I just watched? I think if you combine into that spiritual, environmental, coexistent interconnectivity between all things, the film is just a very rich, rewarding experience. And James Cameron's love of nature and our relationship with the natural world does just bleed across every frame. The relationship between Loak and his Tolkien is one of the most interesting aspects of the film. I kind of love that bond. And I think I was probably attached to that whale more than anything else in the film, which is probably slightly detrimental to the film's writing of the other characters. But, you know, it just shows you the power of what he can do with the visuals. Just go watch it on the big screen. It's so good. It's incredibly clunky and incredibly flawed, but it is just undeniably epic. You will not regret watching it. Do let me know what you guys think. Please consider liking and subscribing to the channel as well, guys. That's always a huge help for me, and we will see you for the next vid.